hadn't been here very long when students began to talk to me about the ghost of Fisher Hall. Fisher was one of the oldest buildings on campus, and it started out before the Civil War in 1856 as the building of a women's college called the Oxford Female College.
All of them had in mind that women would be trained in the refinement and domestic refinement, but that they would also have missions to perform in the world, and many of them trained teachers and missionaries. Okay, later they would do other things, but in the 19th century, those were important things they did.
It had merged after the Civil War with the Oxford Female Institute, which is now what we call the Oxford Community Arts Center, over on the west side of town, formerly called Ox College.
So the Oxford Female Institute later became what we thought of as Oxford College. Was founded down there in 1850. That school, the trustees of that school divided, and its president, Professor Scott, who had earlier been at Miami and had been fired at the time the first Miami faculty member, the president was fired and gone to Cincinnati and then came back. He moved over to found the Oxford Female College, which was a brand new built building from the ground up. It was a kind of sterling example of these new institutions for women. And it overreached a little bit because it cost more than their resources could imagine. And so the Oxford Female College only lasted from 1856 to 1882.
At that point, they abandoned the building where Markham Center is now, Old Fisher Hall, as Miami called it. And it became an insane asylum. The family took over and filled its rooms with mental patients.
And the Oxford Retreat was operated by a doctor who moved here from Cincinnati. And it was a place that people who had disorders of the nervous variety could come for treatment.
Put bars in the windows, had restrictive apparatus down in the basement for those who were particularly disturbed.
You mentioned Wilson Hall. Wilson Hall was built as part of the Oxford Retreat, so it was a cook place, the house that's still there, that's used today by Student Affairs, and all the grounds, the formal gardens, and all the cook field, the intramural field, all of that was grounds of the Oxford Female College at one time, and then the Oxford Retreat, which expanded those properties. So they had a big, lavish landscape with formal gardens, and the Oxford Female College was the main building of this institution.
And it was operated as a mental institution from the 1880s to the 1920s.
Ironically, what was once an institution of higher education for women became an asylum for women in a time when divorce, adultery, or daughterly descent were grounds for being committed to such an institution. In an interview with the Hamilton Telegraph, Mrs. Fred McMillan, a patient at the retreat, claimed her father had admitted her after she filed for a divorce from her husband. Her visitors and correspondence were restricted. She was treated brutally, forced to sign papers she knew nothing about, and was plied with syringes of morphine. This is just one of many stories that haunt the history of the retreat. Stories of torture, escape, accidental death, and suicide.
It's ridiculous to claim that like every insane asylum would be haunted. Just like I was saying with Peabody, it's that old building thing, and especially with an insane asylum, because for a person we have so many connotations in our mind that go with that thing. It's just easier to be creeped out in an insane asylum.
But I believe in the 1920s, Miami purchased the Oxford Retreat. I don't know the circumstances of that. I'm assuming that the mental health business had changed somewhat.
Then that family got out of the mental business. The building was available. We acquired it at the university, converted it into a freshman men's dorm.
But I know that entrepreneurial administrators at Miami saw that huge amount of land, which was essentially everything on the northeast corner of the campus, as the route they needed to go to expand Miami University, and so they purchased it outright. Whereupon the original building of the Oxford Female College became a men's residence hall.
It was in that dorm that the principle of all the ghost stories had its origin. The disappearance of Ronald Henry Tammen, Jr. on the night of April 19th, 1953.
Sort of, I don't know, what would you call the Ron Tammen disappearance? That's not exactly a ghost story. That's just some horrific thing that happened that kind of people feel is kind of weird. You know, weird events. Or the other one where the RA was shot in Reed Hall, and the student then killed himself in a phone booth in Ogden. I mean, that's factual. Ron Tammen disappeared. That's factual.
He was a sophomore resident advisor, an RA, living in room 225 of Fisher Hall. He was a good athlete, a 170-pound light heavyweight wrestler, a member of Delta Tau Delta fraternity, a member of the ROTC. He was just a very, very fine student all the way around. And on the night of April 19, 1953, he disappeared. His roommate, Charles Finley, had been in Dayton and returned from Dayton about 9 o'clock that night of April 19th, 1953, to find that the room that she shared with Ron Tammen, 225 Fisher Hall, with the lights on, the radio playing softly, Tammen's psychology textbook open. He'd been taking notes, and there was the paper in front of the book with his notes on it. And there were Tammen's watch, his wallet, and his car keys.
Is it possible that the ghost of Judge Elam Fisher took Ronald Tammen?
No.
And he had a 1939 Chevrolet sedan parked out in front of Fisher Hall with his string bass in the back seat. Charles Finley had seen the car in its place. He got up to the room, but his roommate, Ron Tammen, was not there. He thought, well, this is strange. He had no knowledge of Ron's going anywhere or expecting to go anywhere. Finley turned in, went to sleep, woke up the next morning. The lights were still on, the radio was still playing. His roommate had not returned. It was after a couple of days of the absence of his roommate that Charles Finley alerted the authorities. My roommate is gone. He's disappeared. He's not contacted me. I don't know anything about where he is. And finally, because we were so close to the Indiana border, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, because we're only 5 miles away from Indiana, he might have disappeared in Indiana. The word went out over local television stations about the disappearance of a Miami student. And down in 7 Mile, Ohio, a woman by the name of Mrs. Carl Spivey, S-P-I-V-E-Y, watched her local television station, saw a picture of the missing student, and thought to herself, my heavens, on the night he disappeared, I had a person looking just like him at my front door at about 11 o'clock at night.